Hello, this is Margaret Ajibode, the STEM Positive Disruptor, and today I have a special guest, Dr. Olmeta-Schult. She's an assistant, the extension assistant professor of practice at the Oregon Sea Grant and the Oregon Sea Grant Extension Coastal Hazards. She's a specialist there, and it's really a long word, so bear with me. And today, one of the things we want to do on this platform, we want to educate, we want to raise awareness, we want to change people's perception and demystify what STEM is, that's science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And what we do, we have special guests coming on board who from different backgrounds to show the diversity of roles and the diversity of people that would work within our industry. And then today's topic is about climate change, but more on the coastal environment, because that climate change is a big thing. It's a big topic, and then lots of things. And then, governments are saying, well, if you don't do something, that this is going to happen. But, we want to hear from Dr. Olmeta-Schult and tell us how she feels about it. But before then, she's just going to give us a background of who she is and what her current role is about. So welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret, and thank you for inviting me to this podcast. Really happy to be here. And so to say a little also briefly about my background. So, let's say I'm the coastal, to go back to like this long title, which is Assistant Professor of Practice and Coastal Hazard Specialist for Oregon State University Extension Program, but also Oregon Sea Grant, which is a program that is like nationwide in the US. And we have one of those programs in 34 of them in all of the coastal states and Great Lakes. And to the role of with this position is basically to work with a diverse range of partners statewide in Oregon. And this can go from like state agencies, local counties, local governments, nonprofits, federal governments, and so forth, because the goal is to ultimately increase coastal communities' resilience to coastal hazards such as flooding, coastal erosion, tsunamis and earthquakes, because we have this risk here on the coast of Oregon, and landslides. So I work with like really a vast range of people, and I do mostly like outreach, education and engagement with those communities.
Okay.
I do also a little of research, but I definitely do a diversity of projects. Like you can see, because of those topics, but I also cover the whole coast of Oregon for this role. So you have multiple counties on the coast of Oregon, and I'm located in one of them, but I cover all of them.
Okay.
So it's a lot to cover.
Yeah.
Yes, but I'm originally from France, from the island of Corsica in the Mediterranean Sea. And but I came to the US to study, found my husband, and stayed here.
That's amazing. I was going to ask you about you being from Corsica, thank you for answering that. That's absolutely brilliant, and I think it's so important as well, because when you think about it, sometimes we migrate to a new place in order for us to better develop ourselves. And as you said, you met your partner as well, and everything just works well for you. But also, this position is very, very important as well, because although it's Oregon focused, you are an environmental and social scientist, and the things you're doing in Oregon is actually it resonates, because there are reports which states that so I'm just going to quickly read it just briefly. This was more recently, where it states, "Oh, the 20th century infrastructure not made for the 21st century climate," and it goes on that climate change is accelerating sea level rise, and with coastal urbanization increasing, worldwide cliff erosion on rocky coasts is an immediate hazard to human lives. So I know this is part of the things that you do, where you liaise with different stakeholders, and it goes on to say is that the whole infrastructure is not going to be as effective, because where climate change is happening, and global warming as well, and the high sea level, the things that's happened that's impacting our world in so many ways. And although what you do is very focused on where you are. The things that you do also resonates on a global front, because there are lots of reports about what are we going to do. I mean, even the government in America was saying, if we don't do something now, then this is going to happen. So there are lots of, scare. I'm not saying scaremonger. There are issues and there are facts. Scientists are saying that. There's a lot of research which shows that something has to be done. So how do you relate that to what you currently do right now? And how do you see a solution? Because it's about providing practical solutions. It's not about just the issues, but about what will really be sustainable long term, because we can find immediate solutions, but the long term is where we want to really tackle. So please, yeah.
No, I completely agree that this is, something I'm working on, let's say here at the state and regional level, because I also work with partners in Washington State and California. But the thing is that, this is definitely a global problem. Like you said, with climate change, sea level rise and erosion, and we have, I think, about 40% of the world population that live within 62 miles of the coast, which is about 100 kilometers. So a lot of people there, and more people have been attracted also to urban areas or even the coast, and even not only residents, but also like tourists, visitors. So a lot of people there. And it's true that so far, the work that I'm doing is considering like some of the solutions and tools that are like sometimes, provided either, being created on the global scales. It's like a global problem. And what is hard though is like sometimes you need to find some of the solutions, see how they can be applied locally, and if they can be adaptable too. That's sometimes what is really tricky, because when, as you mentioned earlier, like being like a environmentalist and social scientist, I'm looking at a little of everything, let's say. So you have the environment, let's say the natural environment, but then you have also the built infrastructure, and you have after like anything going from public health, economy, the different, like sectors, and also the people living there, the different communities, and they are affected not in a equitable way. You always have like more vulnerable and marginalized population. And after we put that also in a mix, like political will and, funding capacity, funding and also local capacity in implementing solutions. So it's really complex. And I agree. And something like, because it can be so overwhelming, in a sense, like where, okay, we have some of the solutions. We know usually if we had like, let's say, all this money and all the goodwill in the world, maybe we can solve things, quickly, and still these solutions take time. But after, like, how do you tackle that? And I think like something I learned through my work, it often comes from a place of relationship building too, and talking with people and building, trust and partnerships. And it takes time, and also like to understand what is going on the ground and what people really, what their understanding of the issues, how they view also, how do you say that? You have to bring the problem back to them so they care and they want to do something, and not feeling like they're powerless as well, because that's something that I seen sometimes in my work, especially when I talk about earthquake and tsunami. People can be like, okay, we're all going to die. What are we going to do? And like, no, there are things you can do. So I think it's really finding back, like, how can you build those relationships and find ways that people are helping people to do some of this work, and so that they care about it. But also, again, is the ways that our system has been done, and sometimes pushing on the side some of the problems. And right now we like going to hit a wall pretty soon if we don't do anything. But it's really hard because the solutions that could have been implemented, over time now we may be called for like more drastic solutions, and that is not going to go well with most people, and especially if they are not, they don't understand what is at stake and how they can be affected.
Of course.
And yeah, and also how maybe in the future, like having a vision of hope, I think is also important. Saying like, what do you want to see the place you live to be in the future? What do you want to leave behind for future generations? And what are like some tangible solutions you can do at your level, but also like ask from your government, ask from, elected officials, the things you can do. Because I think sometimes we come from the point that the problem becomes so big that we feel like disarmed in front of it.
Well, thank you. Because one of the things I heard you say, or just you spoke just now, is that you take the problem back to the community in order for them to feel this. You're actually asking me, what are the solutions? What do you think I can do? Of course, people sometimes they see they hear, as you said, tsunami, or they say, oh, and the initial thought is, oh, then what do we do now? Is everything over? But what you're saying also, because again, I think you talk about hope as well. You have to have hope. You have to look beyond what is the limitations, because there are always going to be limitations. And you talk about funding being a part of the limitations that can also hinder. But based on I know you've been in this job now for a couple of years or so. What is your vision for that? Because again, you said you take it back to community and you do bits and pieces around, but just from your perspective, because there are things you can do, there are things that should be done. Let's put it out there, because you never know who's going to listen and take it on. Yes, we know there are issues, but then again, you're not limited, because we all have to have a voice. For us to bring change, we've got to be the change. We have to be those that lead in that change itself. So please tell me what's your vision, or how do you envisage things changing on a local level, but also beyond that?
Yeah, and that is something I'm still, trying to, wrapping my head around.
Okay.
I've been in this position for 2 years, but something that I've been trying to do through my work is, working from different groups and try to tackle the problem at different levels and from different angles, because there is not only one way of doing things. And I think, for example, let's say I've been working with, with communities. How can they be better prepared in case of emergencies? Doing little trainings. For example, how do you read an evacuation map for like a tsunami? How do you prepare a go bag? After, it's working more like with state agencies, like what can be some tools we can create that can inform like planners and zoning, so people know, and knowing, like, for example, which areas are going to be flooded more in the future in this specific area. So then city planners and others can be like, okay, we know which areas are going to be flooded, which areas that are vulnerable to us. What can be some projects we can do now that we have this information? And after, it can be like being part of more like bigger scale, like state project. For example, again, I'm going back to earthquake and tsunami, but like in what areas should we create, for example, like they're called like vertical evacuation structures. Being part of a steering committee, like, okay, where can they be these located? So people who are like too far to run to high ground, where can they escape? And also coming back to then other problems like erosion is, on the coast here in Oregon, like real estate and the lack of housing is a really big issue.
Okay.
And after is like, we have this coast that in some areas is getting, eroded and flooded. There is a lack of housing. People still coming here to, and buying second homes. And how do you work after with real estate agents, to have also some of the knowledge of like, what is a place that is, if their clients ask, what are the risks on the coast, and for them to be aware of some of the risk and try to address issues from different angles, or even like homeowners guide. If you're a new resident on the coast, what you should know, what are the risks, because often people like are not well informed of the risk, or they think that the risk are like easily manageable, or that someone else would be able to fix the problem. So, and we all have, a role in that. So I think that's, so far my approach is trying to tackle some of those different problems at different levels with different groups and different perspectives. Because it's been really hard to just, apply like a blanket approach. You only have only one. And I think like globally, it comes down to also issues is what are places that are like, safe to build on, because the population is increasing. People want to be living on the coast, or even if it's not the coast, in areas that can be floodplain, areas that are hit by, let's say, more violent storms. So to be aware of the risk, and how can you build more like in a smart way, in a safe way, and also what is already in place. How do you deal with that? That's one of the big problems too, because you probably heard also before talking about managed retreat, saying like, oh, people having to move away. I mean, if you've been living there for a long time, it's a place you love, it's really hard, you attach to the place.
Up and go,
And people usually we can do that is people who have the financial means of doing that, or have maybe other communities and family somewhere else. So if you're like, someone who's been there for a long time, you don't have the means and you have your community there, it's really hard. You're not going to move. So how do you help those groups, those communities as well? So that's, definitely some tough discussions and controversial that we've seen more and more. And especially when you have, like violent storms and floods, or when you see what's happening with hurricane. I mean, it's really challenging, and there is no really solutions. I mean, the perfect solution. You have solutions like it can be more like, let's say, localized and adaptable, and definitely having discussions. And those discussions are tough, but definitely having a dialogue is really important. Like I said earlier, building relationships, but these take time. And I think also, and they also need more funding, because often I feel like you have more funding for like some kind of research, but related to social science research, and having the funds to have time to do, have time to have those discussions with the communities. It takes time and money.
You're right. Everything, and because you're also dealing with the human dynamics as well, and also you mentioned about the different levels of communication that you have to have. So you're not just talking about the people on the ground level. You're also talking about the different stakeholders. So people in the community, planners, those who know, and also the scientists as well, about what are the projection of this erosion taking place in the next projection of the next 5 years or 2. So it's not as clear cut. But life is never clear cut, and I this is why, like, I think it's about challenging ourselves as well. But you also, I think you made a good point that not the solutions that will work locally will not always be something that can be transferable, because not one shoe fits all. That's it's like a just size. Everyone's different size. Every need is different, so you have to tailor it accordingly. But are there key things that one can say if we do this? Because the issue is there, and although you're very much focused on Oregon, that's where you're based, and that's where the need is. That's where you've been commissioned to make a difference, to educate the community, to educate the different stakeholders that are involved, but also to raise funding as well, because that must be quite hard, but also to get people to sort of like see there is a need for us not to panic, because I think when you do, and you mentioned about those who are able to move are those who have the financial to do that, or they have family elsewhere. But you also talked about in again, it's really Oregon focus, is that there's a shortage of housing, which is quite interesting in that, so there are lots of things, there are lots of dynamics that you've got to contend with, that for you to be able to provide a solution that will work long term is about that gathering of that information. Then what do we do next? How do we do? So it's by looking at the short term to the long term, short, medium, long term solutions that would enable you to be more, I guess, more effective, because that there are going to be people who are never going to move because they have a love affair with where they are, which is fair enough. I mean, that's a normal thing anyway. And then you're going to have those who are, you said they have second homes there. They don't need to have a permanent home. It's there, they can always come back and go. Not everyone has that luxury of doing that itself. But where climate change is concerned, because they're saying our infrastructure is cannot cope with climate change as it is now, and things, again, I'm not trying to scare anyone, things are getting worse, and so, there must be things we can at least be aware of what we need to do. I know educating our community is so important. Getting the community involved is so important, because then they can provide solutions as well. But what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think so far, because like I said earlier, like it could be, this work also can be pretty like overwhelming too. And like for me,
Of
like,
course,
and also me for doing this work can bring, some anxiety too. And I want to make, helping people to be better prepared and more resilient. And after is like, what are things, like you mentioned, like short-term things that people can do now and no more with education. But after like long-term, I like having also like a long-term vision, and that is more like with people who like, not only, I think it's for like everyone, if like the community has a vision, it's like, okay, maybe we need to move this school or nursing home to a different place. With climate change, we have like, let's say, more heat waves, and the Oregon is still, cooler, the Oregon coast. But after, how do you manage that? Having solutions like funding or helping people to have, let's say, AC in their home, or like fans and things like that. How do you deal with flooding? If your house is flooded, after, what are the risks for like, public health with mold and things like that? So it's tricky. I think it's like, again, like coming down to small little things. And sometimes I feel like I've been focusing right now a little more like, what are things, tangible actions that people can take, because they know they can do something. It's like a way also to be like having a little more control of the things right now that we don't really have any control of. We're like more aware, like, okay, we're going to have an increase, in those storms or their frequency and floods, but okay, what can I do? And after, like, the next step is having maybe those discussions more at the community level to be like, okay, what do we want a community to look like? What, for example, buildings need to be like, let's say, better prepared for those actions. Is there some like land that we need to just, make sure like do habitat restoration, like related to floodplain, some areas where we need to remove levees and dikes and tide gates, and make sure that those areas are like restored so they can absorb the extra water, for example. But then which areas is it going to be? Where are we going to find the funding to do that? Who can help with that? And that, can be those projects at the long term. And after, like, regionally or even statewide, it's like, what are some policies that can help? Do we need to do more rulemaking? So there is going to be more changes that have to happen, and that those communities, the different cities and towns have to do those, because now it became, a rule in Oregon. How policies can better inform those communities, what is can be also more like assistance, technical assistance to those communities to know what they can do, so they know where to put the money toward, what is like a priority for them to fix, to restore in the community, what contractor, they should contact, what are some issues. So I think it comes again, like different levels. But to me right now, I'm really focused more on let's say the smaller steps. And I'm part of the discussion in what can be, the vision, the next steps. And I'm definitely like I consider myself like a boundary spanner, in a way that I know where some of the resources are. I know, different people. I'm like, okay, and there is a need there for information or assistance. Who can help? And after is people like higher up in state agencies are like, okay, do you know who we can talk with in this community to help with this project and things like that? So I feel like I'm kind of like in the middle of things, which is, so I try to stay up to date about a lot of different, what different groups are doing, what is going on. But on one side, it makes the work also really exciting and diverse, because I get to interact with a lot of different people and involved in a lot of different projects and discussions.
Do you know, I actually do like your role is it's quite nice because in a way what you're saying is that you have your fingers in so many different parts, and you in a way you are the gel that brings everyone together, bring everything together in so many ways. And but also it's because of the I guess in so many, because there's so many different levels of communication, there's so many different levels of interaction, and there's so many different levels of stakeholders as well. Every different level of stakeholder have a different need, and you putting that information together to enable things to happen. And I think, but you're doing a great job. So I'm celebrating you because you are doing a great job. It doesn't matter how long one has been in a job, but what you're saying is that it's also about understanding, because it's about the people as well behind the scene. We know what the issues are. It's about getting people to think in a different way, changing people's perception, and raising awareness. So that's also about giving the community access, or making science more accessible to the community in so many ways, because you're educating them, you're raising their awareness of what is happening on the different levels that you're dealing with as well. And I'm celebrating. I like you very much because you're it's like you want to be in every, it's not that you want to be, but that's just your role. You are involved in so many different things, and I appreciate where you've come from. I appreciate your journey. I appreciate also that you also you host the Rising Sea Voices podcast, and I'm sure that's also about the different dynamics where the climate change and other things as well, because of who you are. You've been an environmentalist as well as a social scientist, and all those things add up together to make who you are. So I we can talk a lot because there are lots of things I wanted to ask you, but I don't want to. I know I feel like I put pressure on you. I know I'm not, but maybe I am. But the reason why we do this podcast, we want to celebrate those people working within the STEM world, that science, technology, engineering, mathematics. We want to show the different roles and different people that work within our industry. We want to showcase, we want to bring the public into our domain and show them what is available as well, and look at issues, because people out there are curious and we want them to know more about us. And I think that's what you also do based on your podcast, but other things that you do, your community, you liaising with the community or the different stakeholders you're involved in. That's what you're doing, and I do celebrate what you do. I know it's hard work sometimes, because also you're dealing with the human factor, and you talk about looking at things from a socio-ecological standpoint. I wanted to go into that, but so it's okay. But I think in a way you're dealing with people. You talked about the shortage of fund, or getting funding to make the difference, because you need, for things to be fixed, sometimes you need money. Well, we do need money, and I think this is what you're also raising as well, that these are something you've now come across based on how long you've been enrolled and what you're coming against as well, that unless we get back to this funding to do certain things, it's always going to be the step back, which you don't want. You want to be able to see progress as you move along. I do like you, Doctor, and I like what you're doing. I want to celebrate you. I want to celebrate you in your journey. I want to celebrate you as a person, and your role. It's a big role. It's actually quite a pressurized role, because you've got to be so many different things to so many different people at the same time, and you've got the higher levels not seeing things that you see, and you have to prove to them it's a need, a requirement as well. So again, I just want to celebrate. I would love to talk with you all day, but I also want to keep it succinct, because I want people to listen to you and see what you're doing within Oregon as well. And yeah, thank you so much. I do like you, and I do like what you're doing. I do like the fact that you made some key points about saying we want for us to get the community involved, we take the problem back to them so they can provide solutions. At least they can it raises their awareness of, okay, what then do I do next? And they also provide solutions back, and that helps you. It helps you do your job a bit better, easier as well, because they're involved with all the decision makes, or some decision makes that are taking place, and the different stakeholders that you are also involved with means you're learning so many different things as you go along. And I know you're going to be leaving your legacy, and it's going to be very amazing. Why, you just need a little bit more time to start stamping your mark and say, "Hey, this is me. This is what I've done." But it is true, and I want to celebrate. I want to celebrate what you have achieved. I celebrate. I'm really excited about what you have in store for the next few years in this environment and what you're going to do. And I'm sure people will see the difference you're making and they will want to be part of it as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't know, like, thank you. You're like putting the bar pretty high. I'm like, man, now I have to do really like a really good job, because Margaret has been like,
no, but
really,
but you're saying lots of things, but not saying a lot of things. Sometimes it's the in between conversation, but I think you have a vision of where you want to go, and it's just it's one of those things where, because it's a human dynamic as well, is you need to be wise in how you deal with that, because you deal with people, and some people do not, they don't like change, and so it's about working with them in order for you to, in order for you to achieve those goals. So yes, I do celebrate. I know you are going to leave a legacy that's going to be very positive in that environment as well. Okay.
Thank you, Margaret. And also thank you for what you're doing with this podcast. And it's true, it's just in a few words, I want to say, like, it's what you're trying to do now. I think it's really important to have, more visibility to those different careers, and how to make it, like, science and STEM more like accessible. And it's something I've been trying to do a little with my podcast back then. I don't host the podcast anymore. I did it for a year, but I got a little too busy. So
it happens.
Maybe I'll start again, but I did it for a year, and my goal was definitely to talk with graduate students and early career scientists about their work, and to say, maybe you don't have your degree yet, but you're a scientist, and what you're doing is awesome, and you're helping, like, advance everything. But also I wanted to show that science is for everyone, and I wanted to reach out really to people who are like making this field more diverse and rich. So that's why I was trying to reach out, talking with people more like from people of color, indigenous people, member of the 2S LGBTQI+ community, and disabled people like me, because I'm like, it's not because also you have a disability or anything, like you cannot do what you want to do, what you love.
Exactly.
So yeah.
As I said, I am celebrating. Do start the podcast again. I think you would. You're opening doors. The community will like you more. They may even help you more. But you know what? Thank you. I really appreciate you. I really appreciate, and I know that there are lots of things you want to do, but don't let any. Just keep pushing. The walls will come down eventually. The Jericho wall will come down. You start getting the results that you want. Okay.
Great.
All right.
Thank you so much, Margaret.
No problem. Thank you. Again, thank you. This is the Margaret Ajibade, the STEM Positive Disruptor. Please listen to this podcast. Please subscribe, like, and make comments as well, and share the podcast with other people as well, because what we want to do is change people's perception. We want to raise awareness. We want to educate. And we also want to bring out the public into our domain. So this is a prime example of Dr. Olmeta-Schult, and she's doing great work in Oregon, and she's going to be leaving her mark in a positive way in that arena too. So please, let us root for her, and let us share and celebrate what she's achieved too as well. So thank you. Thank you.